A millionaire took his daughter to the amusement park and accidentally saw a little girl. The girl approached them and said, "You look a lot like me." The hum of Arthur's espresso machine broke the stillness of the morning. Sunlight streamed through the oversized windows of his sleek Dallas penthouse, painting warm streaks on the marble countertops. Arthur stared at his untouched coffee, his tailored suit as crisp as ever, yet his face seemed weighed down by lines carved from years of carefully hidden grief. Behind him, the quiet shuffling of small feet brought a slight stir to his stoic demeanor. Evelyn, his 8-year-old daughter, peeked around the corner, her curls half tamed into a hurried ponytail. She clutched a sketchpad to her chest, her usual wide-eyed energy tempered by a hesitance that Arthur had grown accustomed to. "Good morning, Evelyn," he said, his voice low but steady. He didn't look up, instead swirling the coffee that he knew he wouldn't drink. "Morning, Dad," she replied softly. She lingered near the doorway, as though deciding whether to venture further. After a beat, she stepped into the room and slid onto a bar stool. Her sketchpad thunked onto the counter, the pages filled with half-finished drawings of animals and faces. Arthur set his cup down, finally meeting her gaze. "Those look good," he said, nodding toward the sketches. She brightened for a moment, tracing a finger over the latest drawing, a swan gliding across rippled water. "I thought maybe we could go somewhere today," she began, her voice tentative. "The park, maybe? I haven't been in a long time." The park. Arthur's chest tightened imperceptibly. The last time they'd gone was with Rachel, 3 years ago. Evelyn had been younger, her laughter uninhibited, as Rachel twirled her through the warm grass. Arthur could still hear Rachel's voice in his head, light but teasing, telling him to put his phone away and join them. That was before the accident, before everything shifted. He cleared his throat, glancing at the stack of work files on the counter. "Today?" Evelyn nodded quickly, her expression guarded, as though bracing herself for rejection. "We don't have to stay long. Just a little while." He looked at her, truly looked at her. The hint of hope buried under careful restraint. The way her hands fidgeted with the edges of her sketchpad. She was so much like Rachel in those moments, persistent, but never pushy. It was a trait that had made Rachel the anchor of their family, the warmth to his reserved pragmatism. "Okay," Arthur said finally. "The park it is." Her face lit up in surprise, and she beamed. It was a rare enough sight that Arthur felt a pang of guilt. She shouldn't have to fight for moments like this. The park was alive with the hum of Saturday. Joggers weaved along the paths, parents chased giggling children, and the air carried the faint scent of grilled hot dogs from a nearby vendor. Evelyn skipped ahead, her laughter resonating as she spotted a fountain at the park's center. She knelt near its edge, mesmerized by the water's cascade. Arthur followed at a measured pace, hands tucked into his pockets. He scanned the bustling scene, feeling as out of place as ever in his neatly pressed slacks. He wasn't built for this. Unstructured outings, public spaces, teeming with life. It had always been Rachel who navigated these moments so effortlessly. He watched Evelyn tilt her head, studying the arc of the fountain, as though she were memorizing its curves for a future sketch. Her expression was so focused, so intent, that for a moment Arthur saw Rachel reflected in her, the same glint of curiosity and quiet determination. "You used to love fountains too," he murmured. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Evelyn looked up, surprised. "Mom did?" Arthur nodded, his gaze softening. She once described them as hidden pockets of magic. Evelyn's face lit with wonder, as though she could see the magic her mother once spoke of. She hesitated before asking, "Do you think she would have liked this one?" Arthur's throat tightened. "I think she'd have loved it." They stood there for a while, the sound of rushing water filling the silence. Arthur glanced at Evelyn's profile and thought of all the things Rachel might have said in this moment, warm, encouraging words that he couldn't seem to find. He swallowed the lump in his throat and gestured towards a bench shaded by a sprawling oak tree. "Let's sit for a bit," he suggested. As they walked, Arthur couldn't shake the feeling that something about today was different. Evelyn's joy was contagious, but there was an undercurrent of unease that tugged at him, a sense of something long buried stirring to life. The world around them seemed brighter, louder, sharper. A soft laugh from a nearby child or the fainter chirp of a bird sent his mind reeling back to memories he had tried to suppress. Evelyn, Rachel, and... The thought abruptly ceased, akin to a door abruptly closing. Arthur inhaled deeply, forcing himself to focus on the present. For now, all that mattered was this moment. Just him and Evelyn, piecing together fragments of a life they both had lost. The park bustled with life, a tapestry of movement and sound. Children dashed across the playground, their shrill laughter carrying through the air. Vendors called out their wares, the mingling scents of roasted peanuts and cotton candy creating a comforting haze. Lucy stood at the edge of the park's fountain, her bare toes peeking from worn sneakers, gazing in awe. It was her first outing in 6 months, a reprieve from the orphanage's drab walls. Everything felt larger here. The sky stretched wider, the trees taller. Even the air smelled different, cleaner, fresher. She hugged herself against the excitement bubbling inside her, her eyes darting from one lively scene to the next. That was when she saw them. Initially, she believed her mind was deceiving her. A girl, maybe her age, sat on a bench beneath the shade of an oak tree. She was swinging her legs idly, her curls glinting auburn in the sunlight. Lucy froze mid-step, her heart skipping. The girl looked just like her. Without realizing it, Lucy moved closer. Her caretaker's distant voice faded into the hum of the park as she inched forward. Every step confirmed it. Same hair, same delicate frame, even the same freckle just below her left eyebrow. The man sitting beside the girl, dressed in a dark suit that seemed out of place in the casual park setting, turned his head and caught sight of Lucy. His expression shifted, polite, measured, but tinged with a flicker of something unspoken. "Hi," Lucy's voice came out louder than she intended, her nerves betraying her usual boldness. Evelyn looked up, startled but curious. "Hi," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Do I know you?" Lucy shook her head quickly, her hands wringing together. "No, but you look just like me." Arthur's brow furrowed. He glanced at Evelyn, then at Lucy, his posture stiffening as if bracing for an invisible blow. Evelyn leaned forward, studying Lucy with wide, unblinking eyes. "Whoa, you do look like me," she murmured, almost to herself. Lucy grinned despite the growing tension around them. "I'm Lucy. What's your name?" "Evelyn," the other girl said, her voice cautious but friendly. "Are you from around here?" "Not really," Lucy shrugged. "I live at the orphanage over on Elm Street." Arthur's gaze sharpened, though his expression remained carefully neutral. "The orphanage?" he asked, his tone low and steady. "Yeah," Lucy said, turning toward him. "Do you know it? Sister Teresa runs it. She's nice, but we don't get to come out much." She hesitated, then added with a laugh, 6 months cooped up, so today feels like Christmas. Evelyn giggled softly, but Arthur remained silent, his eyes studying Lucy intently. A vendor nearby pushed his cart closer, his sing-song voice disrupting the moment. "Fresh peach juice. Ice-cold peach juice, sweet and delicious." Lucy turned her head, wrinkling her nose. "Peach? No thanks." She turned back to Evelyn and Arthur, shaking her head. "I can't drink that. I'm allergic." Evelyn straightened, her surprise evident. "You're allergic to peaches." Lucy nodded. "Always have been. Makes my throat itch like crazy." "That's weird," Evelyn said, her tone light but tinged with amazement. "Me too." The two girls stared at each other, their shared quirk sinking in. Lucy broke the silence with a bright laugh. "That's funny, huh? Guess we've got more in common than just looking alike." Arthur's fingers tightened slightly on the bench's edge, his jaw working as if he were holding back words. He forced a thin smile. "It's certainly a coincidence." Before Lucy could respond, a voice called her name. She turned to see Sister Teresa walking briskly toward her, her face warm but firm. "Lucy," the nun said gently, "we have to get going." Lucy nodded, the joy in her face dimming slightly as reality settled in. She turned back to Evelyn, a wistful smile tugging at her lips. "It was nice meeting you. You're lucky you get to come here whenever you want." "Wait," Evelyn said quickly, standing as though to follow. "Will you come back? I mean, will you come here again?" Lucy glanced over her shoulder as Sister Teresa placed a guiding hand on her shoulder. "I don't know. Maybe someday." She hesitated, her voice softer now. "Bye, Evelyn. Bye, mister." Arthur gave her a curt nod. "Goodbye, Lucy." As the pair walked away, Evelyn sat back down slowly, her gaze lingering on Lucy until she disappeared into the crowd. "She's just like me," Evelyn said, her voice full of wonder. Arthur didn't answer immediately. His gaze stayed on Lucy's path, his mind swirling with unspoken questions. At last, he let out a breath, his voice barely rising above a murmur. "Yes," he said, "she is." The drive back home was unusually quiet, the low hum of the car engine filling the silence. Evelyn sat in the back seat, her sketchpad balanced on her lap, absently doodling as her thoughts churned. Every few minutes, she'd glance at Arthur through the rearview mirror, as if waiting for him to say something. "She really did look like me," Evelyn said finally, breaking the stillness. Arthur's grip on the steering wheel tightened, his knuckles whitening. He didn't respond immediately, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Yes," he said after a long pause, his tone measured. "She did." Evelyn frowned slightly, leaning forward. "It's not just that, though. The allergy thing? That's weird, right? What are the chances?" Her voice brimmed with curiosity, unfiltered and earnest. Arthur inhaled deeply. "Coincidences happen, Evelyn." "But what if it's not?" she pressed. "What if there's more to it?" Arthur didn't reply. He couldn't. The knot of unease that had taken root in his chest during the encounter with Lucy had only grown. Evelyn's questions mirrored the ones racing through his own mind, but he wasn't ready to give them voice. Not yet. Back at the penthouse, Evelyn flitted between her usual activities, but her excitement about Lucy was unrelenting. She sketched and colored with unusual vigor, her mind clearly still in the park. "Look, Dad," she said, holding up her latest drawing. It was a pair of swans, one slightly smaller than the other, their heads forming a delicate heart. "It's me and Lucy," she explained, her eyes shining. "Like twins. Do you think we could be twins?" Arthur glanced at the sketch, his expression unreadable. "Evelyn," he began carefully, "Lucy said she lives at an orphanage. That doesn't mean you're—" "But what if we are?" she interrupted, her voice rising with excitement. "It would explain everything, the way we look, the allergy, even how it felt when I met her. Like we already knew each other." Arthur sighed, setting his coffee cup down on the counter with a quiet clink. "It's not that simple." Evelyn frowned, her enthusiasm dampened. "You don't believe me?" "It's not about belief," Arthur said, softening his tone. "It's about facts, and right now, we don't have any." She didn't respond, turning back to her drawing with a small, disappointed huff. Arthur watched her for a moment, the pang of guilt settling deeper into his chest. She was too young to understand the complexities of what they'd stumbled upon, and he wasn't sure he understood them himself. That night, long after Evelyn had gone to bed, Arthur sat in his office, bathed in the dim glow of his laptop screen. A search bar blinked expectantly at him, the cursor pulsing like a heartbeat. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keys, before finally typing Elm Street Orphanage. The results were straightforward enough: an unassuming institution run by a small group of nuns. Its website was sparse but warm, featuring photos of smiling children engaged in various activities. Sister Teresa's name appeared prominently, along with testimonials praising her dedication and kindness. Arthur frowned, his unease growing. The place appeared completely legitimate, providing a refuge for children with no other options. But then he saw it. A small, easily overlooked detail buried in a newsletter. A brief mention of their collaboration with a local hospital to place abandoned infants in care. He instantly recognized the name, Gomez General Hospital. Arthur leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. It was the same hospital where Evelyn had been born, where Rachel had given birth to twins. Or so she had believed, even after the doctors had told her one of the babies didn't survive. His thoughts turned to Rachel then, her voice echoing from the recesses of his memory. "I just feel it, Arthur. She's not gone. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't shake it." He had dismissed her suspicions, chalking them up to the grief and exhaustion of childbirth. And when she had pressed for answers, when she had returned to the hospital to demand explanations, he had urged her to let it go. Now, the weight of his silence felt heavier than ever. Arthur opened another tab and began digging deeper into Gomez General Hospital. What he found only heightened his unease. The hospital had an impeccable reputation, but there were scattered whispers, anecdotes buried in forums, vague complaints of lost paperwork, and inconclusive answers. A handful of parents had raised questions about missing children, but none had pursued the matter far enough to draw attention. Arthur's jaw tightened as the puzzle started to come together. The orphanage may have been innocent, a sanctuary for children, but Gomez General seemed to hold secrets it didn't want uncovered. Joe Gomez, the hospital's lead obstetrician at the time, was at the center of them all. Arthur shut his laptop, his pulse hammering in his ears. He glanced toward Evelyn's room, where the faint light of her night lamp glowed beneath the door. The idea that Lucy might be more than just a stranger, more than just a coincidence, gnawed at him. For the first time in years, Arthur allowed himself to wonder, what if Rachel had been right? The thought chilled him to his core. The next morning, Arthur sat at the breakfast table, the clink of Evelyn's cereal spoon punctuating the silence. She hummed softly, lost in thought as she sketched on a napkin. He sipped his coffee, his mind still clouded from the revelations of the previous night. "Dad," Evelyn said, breaking through his reverie, "are we going to see Lucy again?" Arthur set down his cup, weighing his words carefully. "I don't know, Evelyn. It's not as simple as just visiting." "But she's at the orphanage. You could call them, right?" Her tone was light, but her eyes were insistent, probing. He forced a small smile. "We'll see." Evelyn nodded, satisfied for now, but Arthur could tell she wasn't letting go of the idea. Her persistence mirrored Rachel's, and that alone was enough to push him into action. Later that afternoon, Arthur arrived at the Elm Street Orphanage, his car out of place among the rusted bikes and an old station wagon in the parking lot. The building itself was modest but well kept, its white paint slightly weathered but clean. Children's voices echoed faintly from the backyard. He adjusted his tie and approached the front door. A woman in her 60s, wearing a modest habit and a kind smile, greeted him warmly. "Good afternoon, Sister Teresa," Arthur said, extending a hand. "I'm Arthur Blackwood. I've been considering supporting local charities, and I've heard wonderful things about your orphanage." Her face lit up. "Mr. Blackwood, how kind of you to visit. Please, come in." She led him into a cozy office filled with mismatched furniture and walls adorned with children's artwork. A faint smell of lavender lingered in the air. "Our children are our pride," she said, gesturing to a framed photograph of smiling boys and girls. "Each of them has a unique story, but they all share one thing: a need for love and stability." Arthur nodded, his gaze lingering on a familiar face in the photo. He recognized Lucy immediately, her wide grin and lively eyes standing out even in a still image. "She's quite the spark," Sister Teresa said, following his gaze. "That's Lucy. Full of life, that one. She's been with us since she was a baby." "Since birth?" Arthur asked, keeping his tone casual. "Yes," Teresa said, her expression softening. "She was abandoned at the hospital. No records, no family to claim her. It's a tragedy, really, but she's thrived here." Arthur's stomach tightened, but he maintained his composure. "You must have seen so many cases like hers." "Too many," Teresa admitted. "We work closely with hospitals to ensure these children have a safe place to grow. But it's heartbreaking to see how many are left without families." Her words lingered as Arthur thanked her and excused himself for a quick look around. Wandering through the halls, he peeked into the recreation room. Lucy was there, hunched over a board game with two younger kids, her laughter carrying across the space. Arthur hesitated. She looked so at home here, so free. A knot of guilt twisted in his chest at the thought of what her life might have been if things had been different. As he turned to leave, another boy caught his eye. Leaning against the wall, the boy was younger, perhaps 5, with strikingly familiar features. Something about his posture, the way his dark eyes seemed to pierce the room, tugged at Arthur's memory. Later, sitting in his car, the boy's face refused to leave his mind. Then it hit him. The missing persons flyer, the same sharp jawline, the same unruly hair. Arthur fumbled with his phone, quickly searching online archives. Within minutes, he found it. Elliot, missing at 2 years old, presumed kidnapped. The boy's parents had been posting ads looking for the lost child for months. The boy was Elliot. He had to be. That evening, Arthur sat in his office, surrounded by papers, printouts, and his laptop. His searches had turned up something chilling. Elliot had been born at Gomez General Hospital, delivered by none other than Joe Gomez. The same hospital, the same doctor, and now, a second child with a mysterious history. Arthur's mind raced. Could it be a pattern? He thought of Lucy, of her resemblance to Evelyn, and of Rachel's unshakable belief that their lost twin wasn't gone. Arthur picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Henry," he said when the line connected, "I need you to look into someone. Joe Gomez. He was an obstetrician at Gomez General. I believe he's connected to something bigger." Henry, ever professional, asked, "How deep do you want me to dig?" Arthur stared at Evelyn's drawing on the desk. 2 swans, their heads forming a heart. As deep as it goes. Arthur sat in his office, fingers drumming on the desk as he waited for Henry's update. It had been 3 days since their call, and the weight of unanswered questions pressed on him like a vice. Evelyn's innocent curiosity about Lucy had evolved into something more. She spoke of her constantly, drawing pictures, weaving stories. It was as if Lucy had become a part of their lives, even in her absence. The phone rang, sharp and insistent. Arthur snatched it up. "Henry!" "Arthur," Henry's voice came through, steady and deliberate, tinged with the weight of what he was about to say. "I've found something." Arthur straightened in his chair, his heartbeat quickening. "What is it?" "Joe Gomez," Henry began, "has an impeccable professional record on the surface. Degrees from prestigious institutions, decades of experience, glowing reviews from patients. But dig deeper, and things get murky." Arthur frowned, gripping the phone tighter. "How murky?" "Well," Henry continued, "there's a pattern. Over the last 20 years, Gomez has delivered an unusually high number of twins, many of whom seem to disappear. Hospitals often reported one of the twins stillborn, while the other went home with the parents. But in nearly every case, the stillborn child was never documented beyond a basic hospital record." Arthur's jaw clenched. "And where do they go?" "Orphanages," Henry said. "Trusted ones, like Elm Street. Gomez has a long-standing relationship with several of them. He's seen as a saint, donating medical services, offering free checkups for the kids, even visiting regularly to check on their progress. Everyone thinks he's doing it out of kindness." Arthur leaned back, his mind racing. "He's been planting them there," he murmured, "separating twins and sending one to an orphanage while the other lives a normal life." "That's what it looks like," Henry confirmed. "And the timeline matches Rachel's suspicions. I found notes she made. Before her death, she was looking into Gomez. She made multiple visits to the hospital in an attempt to access records, but encountered a roadblock." Arthur's throat tightened as memory surfaced. Rachel had been relentless, her conviction unshakable even when he dismissed her fears. "What else did you find?" he asked, his voice thick. "There's one more thing," Henry said. "Gomez's visits to the orphanages weren't just about medical care. He was observing the children, taking notes on their development, asking detailed questions about their behavior and personalities. It's like he was running some kind of experiment." Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. "Experiment?" "I'm not sure of the scope yet," Henry admitted, "but it's clear he's been tracking these kids, how they grow, adapt, and interact in different environments. He's not just a doctor, Arthur. He's a researcher, and the children are his subjects." The words hovered in the atmosphere, akin to a menacing cloud. Arthur's chest tightened as the implications sank in. Gomez was more than just a cunning opportunist. He was calculating, methodical, and willing to take innocent lives. That night, Arthur found himself in Evelyn's room. She was asleep, her sketches scattered across the floor. He picked one up, a drawing of Lucy and Evelyn standing side by side, their hands clasped, identical smiles on their faces. He traced the lines with his finger, his heart heavy. Rachel's voice echoed in his mind. "I just feel it, Arthur. She's out there. I know it." He had brushed her off, telling her to focus on the family they had. And now, the very truth she'd fought for was staring him in the face. The next morning, Arthur returned to the orphanage. Sister Teresa greeted him warmly, oblivious to the storm lurking behind his composed demeanor. He asked to review some of the children's files under the guise of exploring sponsorship opportunities. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," she said, leading him to a small office filled with neatly organized binders. "We're always grateful for the generosity of donors like you." Arthur scanned the files, each page telling a story of abandonment and loss. When he reached Lucy's file, he paused. Born prematurely, abandoned at Gomez General Hospital, no known family. The lack of details was glaring, almost deliberate. As he closed the file, his eyes caught another name. Elliot, the boy he had recognized during his last visit. His file mirrored Lucy's. Same hospital, same circumstances, same missing links. Arthur's stomach churned. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was more disturbing than he'd imagined. He needed more answers. Later that evening, Henry called again. "I've been digging into Gomez's personal records." He's meticulous, but not infallible. I found a connection between him and a private funding group, a shadowy organization known for financing unconventional scientific research. It's possible his experiments go beyond just observing these kids. Arthur exhaled sharply. This man has been playing God for decades, hasn't he? It looks that way, Henry said grimly, and Rachel was onto him. If she'd had more time, she might have uncovered everything. Arthur's grip on the phone tightened. Then we'll finish what she started. Are you ready for what this might mean? Henry asked. If Gomez is as protected as he seems, exposing him won't be easy. Arthur's voice was steady, resolute. I don't care how protected he is. He took my family, and I'm going to stop him. The call ended, leaving Arthur in the dim glow of his office. He looked at Evelyn's drawing again, his resolve hardening. This wasn't just about Lucy anymore. It was about Rachel, about Evelyn, and about every child Gomez had manipulated. He wasn't going to let Gomez win. Arthur stared out the window as the city blurred past, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat this time, her excitement palpable as she bounced slightly in her seat. Her sketchpad was clutched against her chest, and she glanced at Arthur frequently, a small smile tugging at her lips. Do you think Lucy will remember me? Evelyn asked, breaking the silence. Arthur glanced at her briefly. I don't think she'll forget you, he said. You made quite the impression. Evelyn grinned, settling into the seat. She's my age, right? Maybe we'll even like the same things. Arthur didn't reply, his mind preoccupied. His visit to the orphanage today wasn't just about Evelyn's curiosity. It was about finding answers. Every instinct told him there was more to Lucy's story, and he intended to uncover it. At the orphanage, Sister Teresa greeted them warmly, her smile as welcoming as ever. Evelyn clung to Arthur's hand, her eyes scanning the room eagerly until they landed on Lucy. Lucy! Evelyn called out, her voice bright. Lucy turned, her face lighting up in recognition. Evelyn! She ran over, her steps quick and sure. You came back! The girls immediately fell into animated chatter, their voices blending into a cheerful hum. Arthur watched them, his focus shifting between their interactions and the small nuances in Lucy's behavior. She moved with a confidence and energy that reminded him so much of Rachel. Every gesture, every tilt of her head. Lucy, look at this, Evelyn said, pulling out her sketchpad and flipping to a page filled with a drawing of two girls holding hands. That's us, Lucy exclaimed, her face breaking into a grin. Evelyn nodded. Do you draw? Lucy hesitated. Not really, but I like colors. I like how they can make things brighter. Evelyn pulled a crayon from her bag and handed it to Lucy. You can color with me. As they bent over the sketch pad, heads close together, Arthur couldn't help but notice how synchronized they were. They laughed at the same jokes, moved in similar rhythms, and even tilted their heads at the same angle while concentrating. It was uncanny. You must be proud, Sister Teresa said softly, stepping beside Arthur. Arthur blinked, torn from his observations. Proud? She gestured toward the girls. They've bonded so quickly. Evelyn's a lovely child, and Lucy, well, she doesn't always open up like this. She's special. Arthur nodded, his throat tight. She is. While the girls played in the courtyard, Arthur wandered inside under the pretense of exploring the facility. He needed a moment alone to think and act. Near the recreation room, he spotted Lucy's coat hanging on a hook. Glancing around to ensure no one was watching, he reached for it. His fingers found a stray strand of hair caught on the fabric. He carefully pulled it free and slipped it into a small envelope he had tucked into his pocket. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a DNA test. The drive home was quieter this time. Evelyn sat in the back seat, flipping through her sketch pad with a satisfied smile. "Lucy's really fun," she said, breaking the silence. "She even likes the same colors as me. Isn't that cool?" Arthur nodded absently, his mind already turning over the next steps. The strand of hair felt heavier in his pocket than it should have, a tangible link to answers he wasn't sure he was ready to face. That night, Arthur sat in his office, staring at the envelope on his desk. The world outside was silent, save for the faint hum of the city in the distance. He thought of Rachel again, her conviction, her fight to uncover the truth about their lost child. "She's not gone," she had said, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. "I know she's not." Arthur hadn't believed her then, but now as he stared at the evidence before him, he wondered if he had been blind all along. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the envelope and slipped it into a larger one, addressed to the private lab he'd found. As he sealed it, a sense of finality washed over him. Whatever the results, he needed to know the truth, not just for himself, but for Evelyn and for Lucy. The envelope arrived 3 days later, its plain exterior masking the weight of its contents. Arthur sat at his desk, the silence of the house amplifying the sound of Evelyn's soft humming from the other room. His fingers hovered over the seal, his breath shallow as he braced himself for what lay inside. When he finally opened it, the lab's letterhead stared back at him. "How was your day? If this story made your day, leave a comment. Rice, below." The words blurred for a moment before coming into focus. 99.9% probability of biological relationship. Full siblings. Arthur leaned back in his chair, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. His chest tightened as the reality settled over him. Lucy wasn't just a coincidence, wasn't just another child who happened to share a resemblance with Evelyn. She was Evelyn's twin. Rachel had been right all along. The flood of emotions was almost too much to process. Guilt surged first, sharp and unrelenting, as he thought of the years Rachel had spent searching for answers, dismissed and unsupported by him. Then came anger. Anger at Joe Gomez, at the hospital, at a system that allowed something so monstrous to happen. And finally, a fierce protectiveness took hold. Lucy wasn't just another child anymore. She was his child, his responsibility. Whatever it took, he would bring her home. Arthur called Henry later that night. The investigator's voice was calm, as always, but carried a weight of urgency. "I've found more," Henry began without preamble. "Gomez has been involved in an extensive research project for decades, funded by private backers. It's not just about separating twins, it's about studying them. He's been tracking how children raised in different environments develop differently. Wealth, poverty, education, and social interactions. He wanted to see how much nature versus nurture really plays into a person's life." Arthur's grip on the phone tightened. "And he used children for this?" "Not just any children. Twins," Henry replied. "He believed they were the perfect test subjects. Same genetics, different circumstances. He's documented every detail: academic performance, emotional stability, even physical health. It's meticulous, but it's cruel." "What about the orphanage?" Arthur asked, his voice low. "Do they know?" "No," Henry said firmly. "They genuinely believe Gomez is a benefactor. His frequent visits, the medical care he provides, the donations, it's all a cover. They don't suspect a thing." Arthur exhaled, his mind racing. "And Lucy? How did she end up there?" "She was labeled as stillborn," Henry explained. "Standard procedure for Gomez. He falsified the paperwork, arranged for her to be sent to the orphanage, and made sure she stayed off any traceable records. The same happened with other twins I've been able to track, siblings separated and scattered." Arthur leaned forward, his head in his hands. "He's been playing God." Henry's voice softened. "Arthur, I know this is personal, but we need to tread carefully. Gomez has connections. He's protected. Arthur sat up, his jaw set. I don't care how protected he is. He took Lucy from us. He lied to Rachel. I'm going to stop him. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. He wandered into Evelyn's room, finding her asleep amidst a mess of crayons and sketches. One caught his eye, a new drawing of two girls holding hands, their faces lit with matching smiles. Above them, Evelyn had written in careful block letters, "Best sisters." Arthur sat on the edge of her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You were right, Evelyn," he whispered. "Lucy's your sister. She's family." His heart clenched as he thought of Lucy, alone in the orphanage, unaware of the truth. How would she react? Would she believe him? Trust him? He couldn't shake the image of her bright eyes and lively laugh, a mirror of Evelyn's in so many ways. Rachel's voice echoed in his mind again, stronger this time. "She's out there, Arthur. Don't give up on her." He wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. The next morning, Arthur called Henry again. "I want everything you've found on Gomez, every connection, every piece of evidence." "What's your plan?" Henry asked. Arthur's voice was steady, resolute. "I'm bringing him down, and I'm bringing Lucy home." Henry hesitated. "It won't be easy, Arthur. Gomez is meticulous. He conceals his actions." "So am I," Arthur said firmly. "And he made one mistake. He underestimated my family." Later that day, Arthur prepared to return to the orphanage. He watched Evelyn pack a small bag of art supplies, her excitement radiating as she talked about teaching Lucy new drawing techniques. "You think she'll like this?" Evelyn asked, holding up a rainbow of crayons. Arthur smiled faintly. "She'll love it." As they headed out, Arthur glanced at the sealed envelope on his desk. The DNA results, now a symbol of both heartbreak and hope. He thought of Lucy's laugh, of Rachel's determination, of Evelyn's unwavering belief. He was certain that this was just the start. Arthur parked the car in front of a sprawling medical complex that exuded a cold, sterile perfection. Gomez General Hospital stood tall, its polished glass exterior gleaming under the midday sun. But to Arthur, it was nothing more than a facade, a structure housing years of deceit and stolen lives. Arthur, clutching Henry's files, confidently walked through the automated doors, his heart thumping with the intensity of a battle. The bustling lobby seemed oblivious to the storm about to unfold. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency. Patients sat in quiet discomfort, and the faint beeping of monitors hummed in the background. He spotted Gomez emerging from a hallway, his pristine white coat and warm smile portraying the perfect image of a compassionate doctor. For a moment Arthur hesitated, struck by how easily the man's facade masked the monster underneath. Then anger surged within him, propelling his steps forward. "Dr. Gomez?" Arthur called out, his voice sharp and commanding. Gomez turned, his expression briefly flickering with surprise before settling into polite curiosity. "Mr. Blackwood," he said smoothly, his tone measured. "How can I help you?" Arthur didn't bother with pleasantries. He held up a folder of evidence, his hand trembling with restrained fury. "You can start by explaining this." Gomez glanced at the folder, his face unreadable. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't play dumb," Arthur snapped, his voice low but seething. "The falsified birth records, the missing twins, the experiments, your research, I know everything." A flicker of annoyance crossed Gomez's face before he masked it with a calm demeanor. "Mr. Blackwood," he began, his tone condescending, "I think you misunderstand. My work has always been about providing opportunities. These children—" "Opportunities?" Arthur's voice rose, drawing a few curious glances from passers-by. You tore families apart. You stole my daughter. You stole Lucy from us." Gomez sighed, his patience thinning. "Mr. Blackwood, you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. What I did was for the greater good. Separating twins allowed us to study how environment shapes development. It's groundbreaking research." "Groundbreaking?" Arthur interrupted, his voice trembling with rage. "You call destroying lives groundbreaking?" Gomez's composure cracked, a smirk creeping onto his face. "Your wife was just as emotional. She couldn't see the bigger picture either, always asking questions, poking around where she didn't belong." Arthur froze, his breath catching in his throat. "What did you just say?" Gomez's smirk widened, his eyes gleaming with something darker. "Rachel was persistent, I'll give her that. But she was a nuisance. Just like you." Arthur's hands clenched into fists. "What did you do to her?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. Gomez shrugged, as if the answer was inconsequential. "She came too close to the truth. I couldn't let her jeopardize my work. So, I made sure she stopped interfering." The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. His mind raced, piecing together the implications. "You drugged her," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You drugged her and caused the accident." Gomez's calm demeanor remained, but there was a flicker of pride in his eyes. "A simple sedative," he admitted. "She was agitated when she confronted me. I simply wanted her to calm down. What happened after? Well, that was unfortunate." Arthur lunged forward, his rage boiling over. "You killed her," he shouted, grabbing Gomez by the collar. "You took her from me. You took everything." Gomez staggered back, his hand fumbling in his coat pocket. Before Arthur could react, Gomez pulled out a syringe, its contents glinting ominously under the fluorescent lights. "Enough of this," Gomez hissed, jabbing the needle toward Arthur. Arthur dodged, his reflexes sharpened by adrenaline. The syringe grazed his arm, the needle barely puncturing his skin. Before Gomez could strike again, a voice shouted from behind. "Freeze!" Henry's voice rang out as he entered the hallway, flanked by 2 police officers. Guns drawn, they advanced quickly, surrounding Gomez. Gomez froze, his confident mask faltering for the first time. Arthur staggered back, clutching his arm as Henry reached his side. "You okay?" Henry asked, his tone steady despite the chaos. Arthur nodded, his breathing ragged. "Get him out of here," he said, his voice hoarse. "He doesn't deserve to walk free another second." The officers secured Gomez, his protests ringing hollow as they led him away. Arthur watched him go, the weight of the confrontation settling over him. His knees threatened to give out, but Henry steadied him. "He acknowledged it," Arthur uttered, his voice barely audible. "He killed Rachel. He took Lucy." Henry's grip tightened on his shoulder. "And now he'll pay for it." Arthur nodded, his gaze fixed on the hallway where Gomez had disappeared. For the first time in years, the path ahead felt clearer. It wasn't just about justice. It was about Rachel, about Evelyn, and about bringing Lucy home. And Arthur wasn't going to stop until he saw it through. The hum of the orphanage gate as it creaked open sounded unusually loud in the quiet morning air. Arthur paused momentarily, absorbing the sight of the humble structure that now held the key to his family's healing. He clutched the DNA results in his hand, the crumpled edges evidence of the restless nights he had spent, grappling with what came next. Lucy's laughter echoed from the courtyard, a bright melody that momentarily softened the tension knotting his chest. Evelyn ran ahead, her excitement uncontainable, clutching a bag of art supplies. "Lucy!" she called out, her voice carrying across the yard. Lucy turned, her face lighting up as Evelyn barreled toward her. "Evelyn! You came back!" she exclaimed, her joy evident in her wide grin. Arthur stayed back, watching as the two girls embraced like old friends, their connection as natural as breathing. Evelyn immediately pulled out her sketch pad, urging Lucy to sit with her under the shade of a large tree. As he stepped forward, Sister Teresa appeared from the building, her kind smile tinged with curiosity. "Mr. Blackwood," she greeted, "it's wonderful to see you again. The girls seem to be forming quite a bond." "They are," Arthur replied, his voice steady but somber. "But I'm here today because there's something I need to tell Lucy." Teresa's brow furrowed slightly. "Of course. Is everything all right?" Arthur hesitated, his gaze shifting to the two girls. Evelyn was animatedly explaining something, and Lucy was nodding, her laughter carrying on the breeze. "It will be," he said at last. "Lucy," Arthur called gently as he approached the girls. Evelyn looked up first, her expression beaming with anticipation. Lucy glanced over, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood?" Lucy asked, her tone polite but cautious. Arthur knelt in front of her, placing the folder on the ground between them. "There's something I need to tell you. Something important." Lucy's smile faded, replaced by a mix of confusion and apprehension. She glanced at Evelyn, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. Arthur took a deep breath. "Lucy, do you remember when we met at the park? How did you and Evelyn realize you had so much in common?" Lucy nodded slowly, her gaze darting between Arthur and Evelyn. "Yes, sir." "It wasn't just a coincidence," Arthur said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "I've been looking into things, and you're not just someone who looks like Evelyn. You're her twin sister." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Lucy's eyes widened, her mouth opening slightly as if to speak, but no words came out. "Sister," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Arthur nodded. "Your mother Rachel gave birth to both of you, but something went terribly wrong at the hospital. They told us you didn't survive, but they lied. You were sent here, to this orphanage." Lucy's hands gripped the edge of the sketch pad tightly. "So, you're saying you're my dad?" "Yes," Arthur said, his voice breaking slightly. "You're my daughter. And Evelyn is your sister." Lucy stared at him, her expression a whirlwind of emotions, disbelief, hope, fear. I don't understand. Why didn't you come for me sooner?" Arthur's chest tightened. "I didn't know, Lucy. I didn't know the truth until recently. But now that I do, I'm here. I want to bring you home." Lucy's gaze dropped to her hands, her small fingers fidgeting with the edge of the sketch pad. "This is my home," she said softly. "It's the only one I've ever known." Arthur's heart ached at her words, but before he could respond, Evelyn reached out and took Lucy's hand. "You'll still have a home here," Evelyn said brightly, "but now you'll have a home with us too. We can draw together and play together. We're sisters." Lucy looked up at Evelyn, her eyes glistening. A hesitant smile tugged at her lips. "Sisters," she repeated. Arthur watched the interaction, his throat tight. He had feared rejection, that Lucy might resent him for the years she had spent in the orphanage. But Evelyn's boundless enthusiasm seemed to bridge the gap, easing Lucy's fears with the simple truth of their bond. Later that evening, as they drove back to the penthouse, Lucy sat quietly in the back seat, her gaze fixed on the passing cityscape. Evelyn chattered beside her, pointing out landmarks and describing their home. Arthur glanced at Lucy in the rearview mirror, his heart heavy with regret, but buoyed by hope. Rachel's face flashed in his mind, her unwavering determination to find their lost daughter. "You were right," he thought, "and I'll honor your fight by giving her the life she deserves." That night, as Lucy settled into the room Evelyn had insisted on sharing, Arthur lingered outside the door. He listened as Evelyn showed Lucy her collection of sketches and the stories behind each one. Their laughter spilled into the hallway, filling the house with a warmth it had been missing for far too long. Arthur felt something shift. The guilt and sorrow he had carried for so long began to lift, replaced by a quiet resolve. He couldn't undo the past, but he could shape the future. For Evelyn, for Lucy, and for Rachel's memory. As he turned to leave, he heard Lucy's voice, soft but clear. "Thank you, Evelyn, for everything." Arthur paused, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "No, Lucy," he whispered to himself. "Thank you for coming home." The courthouse was a stark contrast to the warmth of Arthur's home. Its sterile hallways filled with the quiet murmur of voices and the sharp click of shoes on polished floors. Arthur sat in a small meeting room with Henry, the air heavy with anticipation. Before them lay folders brimming with evidence, testimonies, falsified documents, and a detailed account of Joe Gomez's unethical experiments. "The police are taking this seriously," Henry said, flipping through the papers. "They've started questioning hospital staff, and Gomez's financial connections are unraveling fast." Arthur nodded, his expression hard. "Good. He needs to pay for every life he's disrupted." "And he will," Henry assured him. "We've made sure of that." Meanwhile, the police investigation had extended to the orphanages Gomez had worked with. Arthur insisted on personally speaking with Sister Teresa, determined to protect the place that had cared for Lucy so lovingly. The orphanage's sitting room was quiet, filled with the scent of lavender and faint traces of freshly baked bread. Sister Teresa listened intently as Arthur explained the full scope of Gomez's actions. Her face shifted from confusion to shock and finally to profound sorrow. "I had no idea," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We thought he was a blessing, offering help, free medical care. I never suspected he was using us." Arthur placed a reassuring hand on the table. "None of this is your fault, sister. You gave Lucy a home when she had no one. You're not to blame for his deception." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood, for uncovering the truth, for fighting for these children." As the investigation deepened, Henry uncovered more families who had been torn apart by Gomez's experiments. Arthur was deeply affected by one particular case, Elliot, the boy he had witnessed at the orphanage. 2 weeks later, Arthur stood on the steps of a modest suburban home. The front door opened cautiously, revealing a woman whose tired eyes widened with cautious hope when she saw him. "You're Mrs. Carson," Arthur said gently. "My name is Arthur Blackwood. I believe I've found your son." Her hand flew to her mouth, tears brimming as she nodded. Behind her, a man appeared, his posture tense, but his expression mirrored the same guarded hope. "Elliot?" he asked, his voice cracking. Arthur nodded. "He's safe. He's at the orphanage on Elm Street. They had no idea he was taken. They've been caring for him as best they could." Mrs. Carson began to sob, her husband wrapping a protective arm around her as his own eyes glistened. "We've been searching for so long," he murmured. Arthur placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "He's waiting for you. I can take you there now." The reunion at the orphanage was both heartwarming and heart-wrenching. Elliot clung to his mother, his small hands gripping her shirt as if afraid she might disappear. Arthur stood back, watching the scene with a bittersweet smile. It was a glimpse of what he hoped for Lucy, for his own family, a chance to heal. Back at home, Lucy was beginning to settle into her new life. Evelyn had taken it upon herself to ensure Lucy felt welcome, eagerly showing her around the penthouse, sharing her toys, and teaching her the household routines. "Lucy, look at this!" Evelyn exclaimed one afternoon, holding up a set of watercolor paints. "You said you like colors, right? Let's paint something together." Lucy hesitated, glancing at Arthur who was watching from the doorway. He gave her an encouraging nod, and she smiled shyly. "Okay." The two girls spent hours at the kitchen table, their laughter filling the room. When they were finished, Evelyn proudly displayed their work. A bright, colorful painting of two girls standing under a rainbow. Arthur joined them, his heart swelling at the sight. "It's beautiful," he said, placing a hand on Lucy's shoulder. She leaned into his touch, her smile small, but genuine. The days turned into weeks, and the house began to feel like a true home again. Lucy's laughter mingled with Evelyn's, and the walls echoed with the joy Arthur had feared he would never hear again. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Evelyn asked, "Dad, do you think Mum would have liked Lucy?" Arthur paused, his fork midway to his mouth. He looked at Lucy, who was watching him intently, her big eyes filled with quiet curiosity. "I think she would have loved her," he said softly. "Your mum always believed in family, in fighting for what's right. She'd be so proud of both of you." Lucy's gaze dropped to her plate, but a small smile played on her lips. Evelyn reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We're all proud," Evelyn said confidently. The day Gomez's trial began, Arthur stood outside the courthouse, watching as reporters swarmed the entrance. He had been subpoenaed as a witness, his testimony a crucial part of the case. Henry stood beside him, a silent pillar of support. Inside, Gomez sat at the defendant's table, his once pristine demeanor replaced by a gaunt, haunted look. The weight of the evidence against him was overwhelming, and as the prosecution laid out the details of his crimes, the courtroom buzzed with outrage. Arthur took the stand, his voice steady, as he recounted the pain Gomez's actions had caused, not just to his family, but to countless others. He spoke of Rachel, her unrelenting belief in their lost child, and the justice she deserved. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Arthur felt a surge of relief. Justice had been served. That night, Arthur sat with Lucy and Evelyn on the couch, the three of them wrapped in a warm blanket. The television played softly in the background, but their focus was on each other. Lucy leaned against Arthur, her head resting on his shoulder. "Dad?" she murmured. "Yes, Lucy?" "Thank you," she said softly, "for finding me, for bringing me home." Arthur's throat tightened, but he managed to smile. "You were always meant to be here." As he held his daughters close, Arthur felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Rachel's absence was still keenly felt, but her spirit lived on in the family she had fought to protect. They were whole again. The morning was quiet, the sky brushed with soft hues of lavender and orange as the sun began its climb. Arthur walked slowly, the crunch of gravel beneath his feet, the only sound accompanying him, Evelyn and Lucy, as they made their way to Rachel's grave. Evelyn carried a bouquet of white lilies, their petals slightly dewy from the early morning mist. Lucy clutched a smaller arrangement of daisies, her steps tentative but steady as she followed her sister's lead. Arthur held nothing but the weight of his emotions, his hands clasped behind his back. The cemetery was serene, bathed in the golden light of dawn. Rows of headstones stood in quiet testimony to lives lived and loved. When they reached Rachel's grave, Evelyn knelt first, placing the lilies gently at the base of the marble stone. "Hi, Mum," Evelyn whispered, her voice soft but clear. "I brought your favorite flowers." Lucy hesitated before kneeling beside Evelyn. She placed the daisies carefully next to the lilies, her fingers lingering on the petals. "I didn't know what you liked, so I picked these. Evelyn said you'd think they were pretty." Arthur stood behind them, his throat tightening at the sight of his daughters kneeling together. For so long, Rachel had been the heart of their family, her warmth and strength binding them. Now, her absence felt less like a void and more like a presence. Quiet, but enduring. "Mom," Evelyn continued, her gaze fixed on the headstone. "Lucy's here now. You were right. She wasn't gone. Dad found her." Lucy looked up at Arthur, her wide eyes searching for reassurance. He gave her a small nod, encouraging her to speak. Lucy whispered, her voice barely audible above a whisper. "Thank you for keeping me safe, even when I didn't know it." Arthur's chest tightened, and he stepped forward, lowering himself to the ground beside his daughters. He placed a hand on each of their shoulders, drawing them close. "Rachel," he began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "You always believed. You never gave up on Lucy, even when I did. I'm sorry it took me so long to see what you did. But I promise you this. I'll protect them. I'll love them the way you would have." His gaze shifted to Evelyn and Lucy, their faces illuminated by the soft morning light. "We're a family again, and we'll honor you every day." For a moment, the three of them sat in silence, the weight of their words settling into the stillness around them. The breeze picked up, rustling the leaves of the nearby oak tree, as if Rachel herself were offering her blessing. Evelyn stood first, reaching down to help Lucy to her feet. "Come on," she said with a small smile. "Mom wouldn't want us to be sad forever. She'd want us to celebrate." Lucy nodded, her smile shy but genuine. Arthur rose slowly, his hands resting lightly on their shoulders as they turned to leave. The sun had climbed higher now, its golden rays casting long shadows across the cemetery. The three of them walked hand in hand, their steps synchronized, their bond unshakable. As they reached the cemetery gates, Evelyn looked up at Arthur. "Dad?" "Yes, sweetheart? Do you think Mom is proud of us?" Arthur smiled, the warmth of it reaching his eyes. "I know she is. She always will be." Lucy squeezed his hand, her voice quiet but steady. "I hope she knows I'm proud of her too." Arthur's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and love. "She does, Lucy. She does." The three of them stepped out into the sunlight, the city of Dallas stretching before them like a canvas waiting to be painted. The road ahead wasn't without its challenges, but for the first time in years, it felt full of possibility. As they walked toward their car, the golden hues of the setting sun bathed them in its light, their shadows intertwined. They were a family, forged through loss, love, and resilience, and together, they were ready to face whatever came next. Rachel's spirit lingered in their hearts, a guiding force that would always be with them. And as the sun dipped lower, casting the city in a warm, amber glow, Arthur, Evelyn, and Lucy walked forward, hand in hand, into their new dawn. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us, and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.